Okay, great. I'm sorry, wrong way on the slides. Great. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce our panel today. I'm going to have the speakers introduce themselves. I have not checked if everyone is online. Cathy, are you with us? Let's see if you may be muted. Cathy, 1 second. Okay, well, while we get Cathy set up, John, do you want to go ahead and, oh, there you are, Cathy.
Oh, I'm here, sorry.
I was just introducing our panel, and it would be great if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about CASE at Duke.
Sure, so I'm Cathy Clark. I'm faculty director for a center at Duke called CASE, the Center for the Advancement of Social Entrepreneurship. And we work with social enterprises, both for-profit and nonprofit, around the world, helping them to scale their impact and also develop the next generation of leaders. And we run, in addition, an impacting investing initiative called CASE I3. And we've been surprisingly, unexpectedly active during the pandemic, and have been creating a website and database to help entrepreneurs around the world access resources, which I'll talk about later.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much and welcome. Thank you for joining us. John, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Total Impact Capital.
Thanks, Judd. My name's John Simon. I'm one of the founders and the managing partner of Total Impact Capital. Total Impact Capital is an impact investing firm that was founded 10 years ago. We focus on impact investing products in the basic human needs sector, health, water, food, renewable energy, and hopefully in the future, education and housing. Given our heavy focus these days on health, water, and food, COVID-19 has also been an extremely busy time for us. We're heavily focused on the emerging markets, particularly Africa and Latin America, and obviously supporting the health systems and the water systems and food systems in those markets at this time is fairly critical. So yeah, we're fairly active, I would say at this point in the fundraising marketplace. Thank you, Jed.
Great. Good morning, John. Thanks for joining. Janis, I'm looking for you on the set on the. Are you with us, Janis? All right, let's give Janis a little. It's 5 a.m. in California, so let's give her a minute to get set up. Nawal, are you on the line?
Yes, Judd, I'm here.
Yes, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Holmusk?
Hi, this is Nawal Roy. I'm founder and CEO of Holmusk. Holmusk is a 5-year-old real-world evidence platform in behavioral health. It is headquartered out of Singapore, but with a base in US, UK, China, and Malaysia. And we essentially work deeply into behavioral health using the real-world data and creating scientific evidence that gets used for defining evidence of care or a standard care protocol, as well as it gets used for pharmaceutical purposes in the phase 3 and 4 studies.
Great, thank you again for joining us and sort of representing our innovator side in this fundraising panel.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Yeah. Janis, are you on? I got an email saying that you joined us.
Yes. Can you hear me now? I
can. Thank you.
Okay, good. I unmuted properly. Well, hello everyone. I want to thank everyone for joining in this webinar. And I think it's such an important time to be together but apart like this. So I'm Janis Naeve. I'm the managing director for Amgen's venture arm, As you might know, Amgen is at this point in time the largest biotech company in the world, and we really focus on grievous illnesses for treating patients. And as the venture component of the company, this is the area that we invest in. So we've got investments that span everything from cardiovascular, renal, oncology, neuro, and we've also moved into the area of real-world data and analytics. And we do all stages of investing, but we particularly have a seed fund for early stage investing.
Great. Well, a very good morning to you, and thanks for joining. Sawan, are you with us on the line?
I am, Judd. How are you?
I'm doing well. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Jacaranda.
Sure. My name is Sawan Shah. I'm the CEO of Jacaranda Maternity Hospital, which is a maternity venture, focused at the sort of end provision of maternal and child health. The sort of vision is to provide high quality maternity care at affordable prices towards the bottom end of the pyramid for Kenyan women, and hopefully we will expand and grow towards East Africa as well. We have a small hospital in northern Nairobi, and we've just raised our Series A to be able to expand to 2 more hospitals.
Excellent. Well, good. I guess good evening, and thanks again for joining. So we have a great representation here on the panel. Certainly would expect and hope that audience members here who have experience or in the process of raising funds or recently raised funds, please join in discussion and share your experiences. I'm going to start off with questions to the investors on our panel, to John and then to Janis. How has the landscape changed due to COVID? Has the total transaction volume sped up or slowed down? And how has your investment criteria shifted? Anything specific that you're looking for during this time?
John, you go
Do you
first.
want to begin?
John, please. Yeah.
Should I begin? Okay. I mean, for us, I think it's a little different than it would be for a typical venture or private equity fund. Most of our vehicles are debt vehicles. They, like I say, invest in basic human needs, which at this point face sort of both a major challenge and a potential opportunity. I mean, in the midst of the lockdowns that have been occurring, economic activity in general has declined, and therefore a lot of enterprises, say in the health sector, that might have been attractive opportunities pre-crisis now have seen their revenues evaporate. And this is particularly true, obviously, in health, where you have a lot of people, and this is true not just in say, Africa, where we're active, but it's true in the United States, where you see a lot of people avoiding health facilities for fear of infection. So on the one hand, they're vital parts of the infrastructure necessary for responding to the crisis. On the other hand, they're bearing probably a disproportionate burden of the crisis's economic effects. And that puts them in a double squeeze where you have credits that are less attractive on the one hand, but from an impact perspective, more required to achieve funding. And the good news is that there's now a tremendous amount of funding that's been put on the table in the impact world to support COVID response. So on the one hand, we have a situation where we have in credits that need capital much more than ever, have a much tougher economic case to make to justify getting it. But on the other hand, we do have access to sources of capital that are looking to support just these types of situations. The final sort of complication is we're not the only ones out there looking to access this type of capital. And so it's a very competitive marketplace for these new anti-COVID funding sources, and obviously you have to have a compelling case to make to go to access them. The other point I would make, so that's on the health side. On the water side, we are seeing, even in the midst of these economic shutdowns, where a lot of the folks who get access to the water services we provide live, on pretty close to the economic margins. But one of the benefits of a basic human need approach is people will do what they can to pay for those things because they need health, they need water, they need food, and therefore we have seen the payments from the households that are receiving the water continue, even though in some of the countries we work in, they're legally allowed to suspend their payments and still receive water because as part of one of the ways to adjust for COVID. But in fact, with some exceptions and some changes, the payments have continued. So in that sense, we've seen a fair bit of resiliency in that sector, albeit you still don't know how long people can keep doing this if the economies don't come back. I mean, at some point, there'll be a need to deliver the water, and there may not be people on the other side to pay for it. So I think it's an environment where a lot of enterprises in our world of sort of basic human needs, are desperately in need of cash. The demand is there. The ability to provide that capital has to go through maybe a different underwriting lens. And the ability to source funds to provide that capital is now dramatically changed in the last few months.
Great, thank you, John. Janis, can you tell us a little bit about how your view on the investment landscape in general and how it may have changed for Amgen?
Sure. I think speaking overall for life sciences venture capital standpoint, I think it slowed the investment pace down a bit. One of the first things we did with our portfolio companies and other VCs too, they looked at just a health status on their current portfolio, making sure everyone had enough capital to continue what they were doing. And then there were some slowdowns in terms of any companies that were doing clinical trials because of obviously the impact from COVID there. But I tend to be optimistic about it. I think that most companies came through that fine. And so I think VCs, having come off of several years of some pretty dramatic fundraising, have a fair amount of capital still at their disposal that they will need to deploy. So I think that, the money is there. I think maybe what I've been hearing from my venture colleagues is that while their deployment has slowed down a bit, one of the challenges is just because of the shutdown, it's very hard to go do diligence on site and things like that. So I think as things start to open, we'll continue to see investments happen, particularly in the healthcare space. Although definitely companies are going to make sure that they have enough capital to kind of weather the storm here. I think from an Amgen Ventures standpoint, we are still very actively investing. Obviously, we're a strategic fund for the organization, so we are not tied to kind of the demands of the other traditional funds that have limited partners to satisfy. I mean, we really do invest in terms of trying to help the patients. So our investment pace has not decreased. In the area of COVID, although Amgen is not an infectious disease company, we are still trying to support the research in that space, particularly as it pertains to some of the aspects of the COVID-19, which is revealing itself at this point in time in terms of like impact to the kidney, the heart, inflammation, the ARDS aspect of it, which is very similar to the ARDS, is the acute respiratory distress syndrome, which looks very similar to CRS, which you see with certain chemotherapeutic drugs and IO drugs. So we are working with different companies and looking at potential investments in that space as well. So I think in terms of what we're continuing to invest in, that's not slowed. We're going to continue to do it, and we are definitely opening up our aperture to invest in the space that will directly impact the COVID-19 patients.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Janis and John. I'd like to turn now to our innovators and ask them, how has the fundraising landscape changed from your perspective? What challenges have you faced, and how have you had to shift your approach? Nawal, if you'd start us off.
Sure. So, for information purposes, we have just closed a 21.5 million Series A round in April. But I would say that, the due diligence or the conversation of this started in July of last year. So, in fact, this deal should have closed sometime by December. And, it came to the wire where, the closing for me was more important, even though I had to give in a lot of items on the terms because the investors have all the desire to misbehave. And it's expected misbehavior, unreasonable, yes, but expected for sure. And by the same time, where we sit, for me, closing was more important, and hence, we just wanted to make sure whether the closing is happening or not. And having said that, now that we have closed, it works in our favor because all of a sudden, that capital has a lot of value for us in terms of hiring, in terms of scaling, in terms of things that we are doing. And we as a company, who are also a huge sort of, the ability to spend is coming at a fair price. Just a year ago, talent would be inflated by 30% or 40%. All of a sudden, talent is at a fair market price that we are getting. So it's, I would say, anyone who is starting the conversation now. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Sorry.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say is some of my colleagues and friends who are raising money right now, and if they are just starting the conversation right now, then that is going to be a very tough conversation to start with, because whether we like it or not, fundraising is a very tactile, experience. But if you are in the middle of the deal making, then possibility of closing is still there. It will certainly slow down, and you can expect some misbehavior from the investors. Yeah. Let's stop there, Jed.
Yeah, yes, thank you. I think we'll circle back on that in a little bit. I want to get Sawan a chance to talk about his experience at Jacaranda.
Sure, thanks, Jed. So I think I'd say quite contrary to what Nawal has said, that our experience, we were on the cusp of closing our Series A before COVID hit Kenya, and we had a particularly big investor who was about to close, and actually the interesting thing is they actually sped up the documentation so that it could actually close, because they wanted to be seen as an investor that, despite COVID hitting, that they were still being seen as an investor who wanted to go ahead and make the investments that they had pledged initially. So we were, I'd say, the sort of benefactor of this, because in a time where people are working remotely, and it may be a case that documentation or any sort of admin bits and pieces slow down, we actually benefited enormously from things speeding up. In addition to that, a lot of the investors that we had closed on and funds dispersed actually reached out to us asking how they could help. And an example of that was a lot of the conditions precedent that we had conditions subsequent that we had that we were asked to enforce by way of condition if they invested. They actually have extended the timelines for that. So I think it pays to when you start the process, certainly does pay to to really know who your investors are and really feel them out so that you know that you're getting in bed with the right partner. And I think that at Jacaranda, we've been very lucky in that regards, that we actually met some pretty stellar investors who have totally shown that they're in the social impact space for the right reasons, that anybody can pay lip service to the fact that they are in social impact, but when something like COVID comes into play, the fact that they've actually come to help out has been one of the more has definitely shown how much in the social impact space they are. In other manners, with regards to the landscape, I think, as Nawal has said, I do agree. People who are starting this process now are probably going to face significant challenges, and I've certainly seen that even with friends who are in the midst of fundraising at this moment in time. For us, the challenge in the healthcare space, being a provider, is less to do with unit economics. It's more to do with cash flow, because a lot of our insurance companies that we are accredited with have kind of gone on a very, very slow burn. So we're finding that our cash burn has been a little bit higher than anticipated, and obviously on the other side, we've had to increase our costs associated with PPE and improving sanitation and just making the environment a lot more sterile than what it may have been pre-COVID. But to be honest, maternity services have continued, and we're certainly seeing that from a profitability and unit economics perspective, that we're still doing relatively okay.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing your perspectives. I'm sure we're gonna get back into conversation back and forth on the implications of the COVID response and interactions between investors and investees. But I guess I'd like to pose a question to Cathy about resources for innovators. What resources are available to identify capital and other resources of funding for those who haven't started the process and are looking for funds in this environment?
Yeah, thanks, Judd. I'd love to talk about that. I'm going to share my screen as well, so I can do this a little bit faster. Is that all right?
Yes, please.
Okay. I can get this up correctly. All right, can you guys see that?
Yeah, we're seeing your entire desktop.
Can you see it just now?
We're seeing presenter view, not the presentation.
Okay, I don't know why it does that sometimes.
When you pick which screen to share, there's two different versions of PowerPoint. There's the full screen version and the presenter version. So you may have to scroll through that.
I am just going to do the PowerPoint and then we will go from there. All right, does that work?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, great. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit was what we've done through COVID CAP, what we've learned through it, and then some other resources that we're just about to release that have to do with what you asked me more directly, which is, what is the fundraising terrain actually looking like, specifically for health and other ventures. So for those of you who don't know, we put together a site called covidcap.com in late March. The question that we were asking was, how do entrepreneurs find the emergency cash relief resources that were being put out every day at the end of March? And we found them extremely difficult to locate. And so we said, what could we do to make this easier? So we put together, it started out as a Google Doc, and then it became a spreadsheet, and then it became a website. Within about 48 hours, we had about 90 resources worth about 14 billion. And I kind of did this on my own as a crazy entrepreneurial undertaking, and realized that most of the listings that people had were not searchable and were not scalable. So we did this pretty fast. We put it up. It is grants, loans for small businesses, nonprofits, local, global, the whole thing. We ended up getting some amazing help from a whole bunch of organizations. Many of them were listed here. And most significant is that we joined, the World Economic Forum has put together a COVID alliance for social entrepreneurs. And we have joined that alliance, which is now supporting, it's a network of 40 funders and networks around the world who care about social enterprises and the vulnerable communities that they serve. And so we are now expanding this as part of that. I first wanted to share some of the lessons that we've learned from doing this so far. So we now have over $1.1 trillion of general, most of it is what I would call general relief, which is from an impact perspective, it is not conditioned on your impact. It is simply for you staying in business, or it might be, as some of the PPP or other things in some of the government relief programs are, conditioned on keeping people employed. And we now, this was from last week, we now have over 800 resources. 73% of those are grants. And so the context of this from someone raising money is, this is about how do you get yourself a cash cushion. This is not about how do you raise money to grow. And so just differentiating for many entrepreneurs, the difference between those two, there is quick money available. Most of it's in the US, as you can see. There is a significant portion of it that we are trying very hard to separate out on our site that is available to anybody, any place, that is impossible to find any other way. You can't go in and search for a location and find this capital. And so we have a pull down on our search screen that says all, and that's the things that you can, that no matter who you are, you can locate. And there are a set of grants and a set of loans that are available to anyone. What's also interesting is seeing kind of who's coming to our site and what their needs are. As of last week, we had 21,000. We've had now about 25,000 visitors. 55% are coming in from outside of the US, from about 110 countries. We've been asking them 4 simple questions as they come in the door of the website. And as of last week, about 1,400 entrepreneurs had told us that they needed over 105 million just in cash relief. So again, not growth capital, but just to stay afloat for the next 3 months. And I love the comments before. It was just like, if you're actually trying to raise growth capital, you need to have a relationship, you need to have a 6-month runway. That is off the table for these entrepreneurs, which is, what do you need? And the other interesting thing from a global health perspective is that we ask them, are they, kind of what kind of organization are they? The impact organizations in developing markets have the highest average 3-month cash need. And those that were between 51 and 100 full-time equivalents needed the most cash. So there is a segment that is being unserved or less served than others from some of the things available. I also wanted to just for a second, if I can share this again. Give me a second to pull up our database and show you a few things. So our search page on COVID Cap allows you to search by geography. It goes, by continent. You can also go by country, and you can search for, the resources that we have there. We are just starting, and it's not up here yet, we are just starting to classify the resources by whether they are general relief or what is their sector or impact focus. And so that's the other trend I would note, is that at the beginning, everything was general. And now what we're starting to see is more and more health specific or impact specific, outcome specific funding become available. And we're going to expand our site, because this is actually what we care about. I've always cared about, expand our site to contain that. And that's rolling in as we go. So as this grows, if you are doing health funding or working in health, I think you should, should come back to this and continue to search for what's there. So this is just to give you a sense of, just what's in South Africa at the moment. So we have 26 listings and you can get to all of them within a click. If you are a funder, please come to our ad page. because you can add any resource that is direct to entrepreneurs we would like to know about. And doing it through our ad page, you can always just send us a link, but doing it through our ad page allows you to classify which countries it works in and what the assistance is, and that helps a lot. The last thing I wanted to mention is that we just added a help page this week because we are about to announce tomorrow a new guide. In addition to COVID cap, CASE has 3 other things that relate to entrepreneurs' needs during this time. One is that we have an online training tool called CASE Smart Impact Capital that we actually developed in partnership with Innovations in Healthcare several years ago, which is an online step-by-step guide for entrepreneurs about how to raise capital. We also have a program called Scaling Through Mass Disruption, which is a video series of interviews with entrepreneurs about how they are dealing with the crisis. And then we have our Scaling Pathways series, which is a set of kind of best practice guides by theme for social entrepreneurs. And so we have guides on talent at HR, we have guides on partnering with government, and we have a new guide that's about to come out on using data. So that's a little bit more generic. But within the CASE Smart Impact Capital, we are just releasing tomorrow this new guide, which I already pulled up here so to save a little time, which is a 1-page amalgamation of all the best advice that we've been able to curate on 1 page about how to raise capital during COVID-19. And so if you have a set of portfolio companies, I would urge you to share this with them. It will make them more sophisticated about working with you. If you are an enterprise or an entrepreneur, I would also suggest that you look at this. It basically goes through the step-by-step that we put into CASE Smart Impact Capital, but then says, given COVID, here's how this is different. Here's how due diligence is different. Here's how pitching is different. Here's how reaching out to investors because you can't go to conferences is different. And so it's from the entrepreneur's perspective, what can I do to manage this process during the pandemic, which is really very different. So I think I'll stop there, and I'm so happy to take questions on any of it as we go.
Outstanding, Cathy. This is obviously a great resource for innovators and for the portfolio companies of our investors. So thanks so much for putting this together. Just out of curiosity, the World Economic Forum Global Alliance for Social Entrepreneurship. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how, I guess, CASE's role and the role of COVID?
Yeah. So it was, a pandemic initiated thing, and the idea is the alliance members are concerned that specifically in developing markets, the vulnerable populations are hard to reach, right? So we know that from the U.S. through the Payment Protection Program that there's basically a funnel of capital, and it's in this case it started with government, and they tried to go through banks. And they realized it was extremely difficult because those banks didn't necessarily have the relationships with the smallest organizations on the ground who most needed the capital, right? And so what happened is they did it really fast, and most of it didn't trickle down. Most of it didn't make its way. The only way that it made it down was through community development finance institutions, who were then given a specific allocation in the second one. Well, in most developing markets, we don't even have half of that infrastructure. So the World Economic Forum and the Schwab Foundation said, what can we do to inform ourselves and to create kind of rapid information and feedback loops around what's working and what isn't working for social entrepreneurs and the communities that they represent. So there's 4 pillars of work. One of them is understanding, and we are highly involved in that pillar. Second one is developing capital resources, and so making the capital flows among the members more clear so that they can raise and deploy capital faster among each other. And some of the partners, we have USAID, some of them are big government partners, some of them are individuals, right? It's a whole range. And then many networks like Andy and Impact Hubs and so on. The third one is, what can the Alliance do to make it easier for them and their member networks to share non-financial resources? And the fourth one is policy. What can the group do as a whole to advocate as one voice for the needs of vulnerable communities as the pandemic goes on and if they are not being met?
Sounds like a great alliance, and pretty impressive that it was put up in the short time that it has been. Well, I guess I have a few more questions for our panel. These aren't going to be directed at anybody in particular. I'd love to join in, and I see people are asking questions already. So actually, let me go to Bobby. Are you able to track the question is, are you able to track when social entrepreneur received funding due to the site to give attribution of success?
We are not yet. I would love to be able to do that. I am not sure how to do it at scale yet, but it's a great question. We're trying to figure out how to even find out whether the money was deployed at all at the moment, because it's really easy for people to list the stuff they intend to do, and we know that that's not enough.
Great. Yeah, I would encourage everyone to use the chat function to submit questions. I am going to go ahead and reshare the panel screen. And I guess I'll throw this out to the panel in general. Is, I guess, what's the most important thing an innovator can do to attract funding in this environment?
I think I can take the first cut at it. Number one, stay to the course. Whatever we have been doing, I think as a company, keep doing what you're doing. That's number one. But number two, what really matters is differentiating between the investors who are writing the check versus who are pretending to write the check. And there is a huge difference between the two, I would say. And number three, as you get close to a discussion with an investor, then literally having a clear-cut timeline for closing. Do they know? And if their timeline is 9 months of closing, whereas your expectation is that we need to close in the next 2 months, then having that differentiation and having that agreement upfront is much better. Whenever I hear stories like Sawan's, it is amazing that there are investors who behave the best behavior that is out there. But that behavior is both on the CEO side as well as on the investor side. There is a full distribution, and the distribution goes from as good as it gets to as bad as it gets, and being able to differentiate is important. And number four is, this is not the time to optimize the best valuation and the best best deal. I think this is time, if the capital is of urgency and if you need them in a finite time horizon, then finding who will find that investor who will give it to you. Closing matters far more than the valuation of the terms. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Nawal. Any other, I guess maybe from an investor perspective?
Yeah, I mean, well, again, as an investor, you're sort of both putting money into enterprises, but also getting funding from other sources. And a big focus of us over the last month or so has been getting the financing in from other sources. So I think there are two things Nawal said that I think are relevant in that regard, especially when, like I said, there are lots of new sources of capital that have just been created. Cathy obviously is cataloging all of them to address the crisis. And I think that there are two issues. First, you can't go after all of them. You have to have a strategy for identifying the ones that are most aligned with what you're trying to do and prioritize and be discriminating versus the ones that may push you and pull you in directions that don't make a lot of sense. But then the flip side of that is also true, which I think Nawal was suggesting when it came to not sticking to sort of a specific valuation, which is also, if you identify the investors that are aligned with you, work with them to create a financing structure that makes sense for both. Don't sort of say it's our way or the highway. I think there is a lot of investors out there who have an impetus to try and get their money out to address the crisis, to not miss the opportunity to make a difference during this time period. but they do have their own imperatives. And if as a recipient of funds, you insist on doing it only one way, you're going to maybe find a lot of those folks move on to other people who can put their money to work in a way more aligned with what they're trying to do.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Janis. Yeah, I agree with both Nawal and John. I think, Nawal, you have such a great insight in terms of the investors. I think that there's nothing more important than the investor core that you choose, and that you truly get alignment. And I think as a CEO, you probably have a good sixth sense as to people will say what they want, right? But you'll be able to kind of read through it and make sure that it's in alignment, right? It's long money, or it's they're also not in it for the fast buck. That's important. And John, I think you're right as well. I mean, you brought up a good point. Is what's important now about raising money, I think, is that no one really wants to go this alone or be the only investor in. I think that it's going to be important to form the right syndicate, even if it's a small syndicate of investors. I think that there is definitely power in terms of a group. So I think, John, you made a really good point about the co-investors. And I think it is time to be a bit flexible on terms, for sure. Some VCs will definitely be more price sensitive than others. And again, you just kind of have to balance what they're bringing to the table. And hopefully it's not just the cash.
I can add a few more things. One is that we've heard from a lot of investors and totally makes sense, which is you really want to create a new narrative for your investors about what your business model is given the pandemic. You want to basically show that you understand as well as you can, because everything's in flux. A little bit like some of the comments at the beginning of the call from the entrepreneurs. Here's what's going on with our cash flow. Here's why. What are the drivers of your business? How have they changed? And then what is your resulting new business plan that is readjusted? And can you communicate that very effectively to investors? I also think that, especially for global health enterprises, I think it's more true than ever that many of the global health models that might be either non-technology based or working with hard to reach or low to medium income populations should truly consider different types of capital across a much larger spectrum than simply looking at equity right now. There is, expectations, as there always is, for equity of growth. Some of those have tempered. There are equity investors who are saying, I'm not looking for unicorns right now. I'm looking for camels who can, hold on to my cash and live for a long time as they grow more slowly. But there are still financial boundaries around equity funding that make them need things to, happen in a certain amount of time. And so there is a much broader array of instruments, from revenue-based financing, to different kinds of notes that I think entrepreneurs should explore, especially during this time. And then the third thing I would say is completely agree with the other investors who have said this is not the time to insist on absolutely perfect terms and alignment. And yet it's also not the time to kind of make a foolish decision that you think might risk your mission. Make sure your mission is intact. Make sure you have enough control of the aspects of your mission that matter to you, so that you haven't created a deal where somebody's going to take over your company and pivot it in a different direction in 3 years, and you didn't realize that because you were doing it during a crisis.
All outstanding advice. Thank you so much for your contributions. Please, again, audience, please submit questions or unmute your mic and jump in. I didn't want to cut off it if anybody else on the panel had something to add on the current discussion. We do have a question from the audience. It was around investors' appetite for investing in deep tech investments, such as cell therapies, since diligence timelines are compressed. I don't know if either of our investors on the panel are in that space, but either of you wish to comment on that as far as the compression of diligence and specifically related to COVID therapeutics and I guess technologies addressing that.
Well, I can jump in here. In terms of cell-based therapies, I mean, certainly most of the work has been done in the area of oncology, and of course, that's kind of where our awareness is of it. And so we are investing in technologies that help support that. I think in this time, though, it's very, as I mentioned earlier on, it's in terms of doing diligence, it means a lot, particularly in terms of cell therapy, to be able to meet face-to-face or visit a site. And so it does add an extra hurdle to not be able to do that level of diligence, because it is an area where, extremely high science that goes into this. And so as such, it does require more diligence. But again, I think I've been doing this for a long time, and in science for a long time. And I have to say cell-based therapies are, I think this is really a game changer of our era. So I would say that there's still going to be quite a lot of interest in it, but it's going to take a little bit longer because of the challenges of doing diligence under under the pandemic structure at this point in time.
Thank you. Yeah, this is challenging on all fronts, and on the research and delivery and investing space. And frankly, amazed how quickly the industry in general has been able to pivot and adapt to the new environment, and still not just keep going, but create new mechanisms in the meantime as well. I guess that maybe segues into another question that I have for the panel, and that is, has investing in fundraising undergone a fundamental and permanent shift as a result of the pandemic, or do we see things reverting to an old normal in 2 years? And I guess this is both from the investor side and the fundraising side. No one in particular, but does anybody have any reactions to that? Any thoughts on fundamentals of investing?
So let me take a first cut at it. Number one is a sector like us. Some sectors will certainly benefit quite seriously, and especially in healthcare. Anyone who is working in the mental health area or the behavioral health area, that is expected to go up, because now it is almost proven that how telemedicine, telepsychiatry, or any kind of consultation business online works. That's number one. Number two, I certainly will not take every meeting in person. I think there are meetings to be taken in person, and there are meetings taken to be on the Zoom. Zoom works. Once you have figured out the working relationship with your investor, then you really don't have to fly 18 hours to meet them for 2-hour meetings. And I think these two are the major fundamental differences that we see coming up in the next 12 months in our business.
I do think there are sort of new business models that maybe were in development prior to the crisis that now are proving themselves effective during the crisis, and hopefully will be scaled and expanded perhaps as a result of the investments that we're talking about, and come out the other side as more of the default ways of doing business. So for instance, digital loans obviously are a much easier way to get money out the door to begin with, reduce costs, and in the crisis, they're probably the fastest mechanism to address the cash flow shortfalls of a number of the clients of the Medical Credit Fund, which is one of the funds we work with in Africa on healthcare. And I imagine that as a result of what we're hoping to do now to get more money out to a number of the enterprises that are seeing significant cash shortfalls, the digital products that has largely been developed and is very active in Kenya may be expanded across the continent and be a much more common tool post-crisis than it is today. I do think, and to some extent, part of what the digital tool does is it automates a big part of the diligence process. I do think there are some elements that you'll never be able to get away from, and will of the diligence process that will return once the crisis is over. But I think hopefully there'll be more effective, more streamlined, more cost-efficient modes of doing business that will persist once the crisis is over.
Certainly does seem that business transaction has changed and travel has changed permanently. But does anybody else on our panel like to address the fundamental shift? All right, I have one question from the audience. Has investor sentiment saturated in any specific areas related to COVID response? For example, conversational AI. Janis or John, have you guys seen any particular investors rushing into one particular area?
Well, I guess this question is, has the interest gotten so great that it's overwhelmed the opportunities? Is that what they mean by investor sentiment saturating?
I'd welcome Raghu to I'm just reading from the chat. Yeah, I think that's the idea. I think is there a scenario?
Yeah. Yes. That was. Sorry.
Yes. All right. Yeah. It's an interesting. I mean, I guess like I said, our focus at this point is on health enterprises and keeping cash flow flowing to them so they can survive and be around to both deal with the demands that COVID is going to place on them, and then hopefully be around to support the health system in the future. So the areas where we're focused, primary clinics, small scale hospitals, laboratories, things like that, the demand greatly exceeds the supply of capital. And even if we got all the capital we're looking to raise through the various COVID related funds, we don't have any illusions that we'd be able to completely meet that demand. So certainly we're not looking at a saturated situation in our sort of small corner of the marketplace.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we are nearing the end of our time together, and I'm going to apologize to my colleagues at IH. We're not going to be able to present our database, evidence database. We'll be sure to get that on the agenda in 2 weeks. So I just want to take these last couple moments to thank our panel very much for joining us this morning. Some of us very, very early in the morning, and some of us in the evening. So thank you again. I think it was a very productive conversation. And please, if anybody else has any additional questions, certainly let's keep this conversation going online on the groups.io site, and reach out if you would like to join with that group. All right. So with that, again, thank you, panel, for joining, and everyone have a good day.
Thank you, Judd.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for
Thank you.
participating, and Judd, thanks for organizing this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.